This exercise is going to be jumping into the next level of transformation processes in Photoshop. So we're going to be further exploring different techniques of collage and using different transformation methods in order to, again, work with more collage and develop more collaged images. So for this particular exercise, we're actually going to be using different transformation processes to almost develop a texture. So we're going to be collaging so much that it almost creates the sense that the collage itself is a texture. And we're again going to be using a self-portrait and also combining different objects into that self-portrait. So we're working with a couple of different techniques of collage. And again, this is more just to explore what the options are in using this particular tool, Photoshop, and how to develop different techniques of collage within this digital environment. So the artwork that you see here on the right, this is a contemporary artist named Lola Dupree, who does collage and illustration. And she actually works for a lot of different publishing houses, so she'll do a lot of covers for books and different graphics for people that are working with books. So this is something that she could have done using analog methods. So she could have just had two different images, and I believe this is Audrey Hepburn, two different photographs that she was cutting out of and then layering on top of multiple different times. And it's also something that you can do within a digital environment, and that's what we're going to be trying to approximate with this particular exercise. So going into the workspace, I actually have the Photoshop file of my previous exercise open, and this is more, I want to demonstrate how to do some of these techniques, and then I want you to be able to decide how you want to direct your final piece for this particular exercise. So the requirements for this exercise, I'm just looking for people to explore and create some depth of texture, and also to continue to transform this image using skew and distort processes, which are all within the transform process under the edit menu. And then I also want people to be working with multiple layers of the same image. And then also I want people to try to add in one element from a photograph that you've taken. So not of your face, but of another object or setting that you decided to photograph. And for these exercises, I think it's really important for you to be using your own photographs. We're going to be getting into using found images and using images that you're getting from the internet. But for these first exercises, again, I just want people to get into the habit of taking images themselves and using those as their base images, because this is for a number of reasons. Number one, it immediately makes them more personal. The images and objects that you have around you tend to have more associations with. And then on top of that, it immediately makes your work more unique. So you're searching for instance, this is a record player. If I throw that into Google image search, I'm going to get a selection of different images to use, and probably some of them are going to be pretty low quality, so I'm only going to have a couple of them to choose from, and some of them are going to have crazy logos on them. So really, for as many images as there are in the world and posted on the internet, the more that you're using those types of images as sources for your base images for whatever images you're creating, the more chances you run into seeing someone else who's using the same image to start from. And so again, this is all about bringing in your own work and wanting to bring in as much as your own original photograph as possible. So to start with, I'm just going to go into a couple more of the transform processes within Photoshop. And the first thing I want to do actually is I want to be able to work from this layer, but I want to be able to have it be a layer and not the background. So I'm going to make sure that I have the background selected. I'm going to hit Command A to select it all. I'm going to copy and I'm going to paste. And this way I don't have to worry if I accidentally transform a couple of areas without making them into their own layers. This way I don't have to worry about messing with that background image. And then I also I want to eventually be able to play with the opacity and potentially have a color or a different texture as the background, and then have this base image, which I'm going to keep as untransformed as possible. I might want to play with the opacity with that, so I'm going to be wanting to have some background elements shining through. And if I just leave this as the background, then I won't be able to see any difference here. So I'm going to select that background. I'm going to delete, and for now I'm going to make it white. All right, so now I'm going to change this to say face original. And you know, these names, they're just for you, so you can name them how you want to. You don't need to have the same names that I'm using, and it's just so that you know what they are. All right, so I'm going to go here, and I'm going to start working with a couple of different transform tools. So first I'm going to create a selection. I'm going to use the polygonal lasso tool and just create a triangle selection. All right, so now I'm going to copy and I'm going to paste that. And so now I have that in that layer. And then I'm going to go back here, and I'm actually going to command and click over this layer thumbnail, and I'm going to go back to that background. And then if you remember from several exercises previous to this, if I press M while I'm within this, when I'm within the boundaries of the selection, I can actually just move the selection and not move the area. And I think I could even transform the selection. So I'm actually going to go here. And so this is keeping it so that the selections that I'm making, I'm retaining the original quality of those. All right, so I'm going to press Enter, and then I'm going to copy, and then I'm going to paste again. All right, and then I'll move that slightly. All right, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to go back up to Select. I'm going to go back to Transform Selection. I'm going to transform that selection. I'm going to move it again. Press Enter. I'm going to go back to that layer with my whole face. Command Copy, Command Paste. And so you're starting to see how it's really developing this fractured, transformed image. And I can continue to play around with the scale on those. Then I'm going to grab that selection. I'm going to transform the selection one more time. So I'm going to change the rotation. Maybe this time I'll actually flip it around. So that's changing the orientation. So it's the same thing as doing the flip command. And then I think I might make this one a little bit smaller, but then maintain the proportion. So I'm holding down Shift in order to maintain that proportion. All right, so then I'm going to copy and I'm going to paste. Whoops. And there's that thing that happens. All right, where did that go? Oh, okay. Let me go back a couple of steps. So I think that what just happened is that, yes, I did not have the right layer selected when I copied and pasted. So now I have the right layer selected, I'm copying, I'm pasting, and I still can't tell which one it is. There it is. So then I'm going to move that. All right. So now I have this group of layers that I have transformed, and I also have this original image. So what I'm going to do here is I'm actually going to change the opacity on this, and I might keep this and I might not. Right now I'm doing this mostly so I can see what these other layers are looking like and where they are. And so what I'm going to do now, and over here in the layer tab you're going to see something that I'm doing. I'm holding down Shift. So the way that we've been navigating this tab is that you go and you click through and you can click different layers, and that's how you select them. Now, what if you wanted to select multiple layers at the same time? So this way, if you hold down Shift and then click, it'll select the range from where you first clicked when you're holding down Shift and then where you last clicked. So now, this is the same thing as selecting, as if it's treating it as if these layers are all on one layer. Another way to do this is to link them. So you select them all, and then you can go over here to this little, it's all the way at the bottom. It's that little chain link icon, and you can click that. And then the only way to unlink them is to right click and then go to say unlink layers. Another thing that you can do, and this is in particular if you are wanting to never have these be individual layers again, and there's different reasons why you might do this. One reason is because, in earlier versions of Photoshop, you couldn't apply adjustments or transformations to multiple layers at the same time, but now you can do that. But sometimes, if you know that you're never going to want to move around these different layers, you might want to do that. But for now, we're just going to actually keep them all as the same, we're going to keep them as the same layer, as different layers. But if I did want to merge them all together, I would select them all, go up to Layer, and then I would select Merge Layers. And that will actually select, I think that will merge all the layers. Oh no, it'll only merge layers that are selected, and if you have all of them selected, it will flatten the entire image. But I'm not going to do that. Okay. So now I'm going to apply a more advanced transformation to all of these layers as they're selected. So I'm going to go up here and I have them all selected, and then I'm going to go under Edit, I'm going to go to Transform, and I'm going to do a Distort. So what this does, and this looks really similar because it is the same kind of bounding box, but instead of it being a scale box or something that you can rotate, you can actually select each of these little handles and then change the way the image is falling. And so this starts to play with the perspective, and it also will do different things if you have different keys selected. So this is skewing this when I hold down the Option key. When I don't hold down anything, it's doing multiple distortions at once. So you have a little bit less control. And you can see how this can really start getting different angles and different scale things that you couldn't quite get as easily with just using the free transform tool. So I'm going to press Enter, and then and this is just to show again what these different things do. I'm going to go up to Perspective, and then it gives you a similar thing, but this will essentially allow you to add a sense of perspective to the layers that you have selected or to the area of the image that you have selected. Okay, so let me go back a couple of spots here. All right. Okay, so what I want to do first is I'm going to, so another thing that you can do when you have everything selected, when you have multiple layers selected, is you can Command All, copy, and then paste. Oh, never mind. You can't do that. There's another way to do that. So I'm going to go and now add one more transform, and that's just going to be the skew. And this is very similar to the distort, except it retains the angles. And then I'm going to go and just shrink this down a little bit. Okay, so now I have a further fractured self-portrait, and I also, and as you can tell by doing multiple of these processes over and over again and having this sense of repetition, you start to get this feeling of this almost texture. So it's gone from being a single transformation that is more about the split between the face and the different shape that it's creating, to these multiple transformations and these layerings that are developing almost a sense of texture. All right. And so the last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to incorporate another element from one of the photos that I took. So I think I'm going to turn this into part of my mouth. And again, this is something that started with early collage. Let's try a quick selection on that actually. From the foundations of collage, it's taking these images and combining them in ways that are unexpected or not considered proper, and making these combinations that don't really make any sense, and then saying, you know, why doesn't this make sense? We're subverting this image, we're deconstructing this image. So I'm going to copy that and go back to the original. I'm going to paste. And also, when you're adding these objects or these images, be really thoughtful about what you're deciding to photograph. Again, these are self-portraits, and the overarching intention, or what could be an overarching intention with self-portraits, is to convey or communicate some sense of identity. So the images that you're incorporating into these self-portraits are going to be read by the viewer, even if you're not intending them to be. It's going to come across as something that you maybe have some kind of attachment to, or something that you believe makes up part of your identity. So again, this is another consideration when you're working in this format, when you're working with collage. You want to think about the images that you're combining together, because even if you aren't, the viewer is going to be reading into that. And I think that imagery like this is always much more successful when you have some reason for making these decisions. And I think that on top of that, you're thinking about a way to communicate some idea or some information to the viewer. And then the viewer is able to see that and make those connections. And maybe it's not going to be the exact same thing that you're thinking, but if you're actually being intentional with something, chances are that different viewers are going to see different things, and they're going to put their own ideas and interpretations onto your work. So it's never going to be exactly what you mean, but at least if you have some idea into the work, it will be coming across as something that isn't just random. And that's something that some artists work with as well. But again, when you're working with something like self-portraiture and collage, you want to think about how the viewer is kind of trained to read those things. So we see an image that someone has made of their face and they've altered it. It's just hard not to think that some of those alterations or the transformations have no meaning. You just assume that there is that meaning there. So again, just remember that as you're making these decisions, as you're deciding what colors to use, as you're deciding what objects to incorporate, you want to have some reason for those choices. Okay. So, this is interesting because I was thinking that this could be a really interesting part of my mouth, but now I'm really liking the way that it comes across my face and the composition that it's forming. So I'm actually going to leave it like this. And I'm going to make this black and white, and then I think I'm going to bring it above there and maybe adjust the blending mode. Okay, so again, this is about how you're able to incorporate these different levels of meaning. And now with this exercise, you're incorporating additional transformations of a portrait and creating almost a texture using the collage technique. And then you're also starting to include objects that aren't particularly like of a face or of your face, and aren't even human, and then merging those and collaging those into your self-portrait. Okay. And then again, this is a great starting off point for you to add color, to again explore developing more texture, perhaps through the entire piece that you're working with. And make sure to save this as its own Photoshop file. I know that a lot of you might be working from the Photoshop file that you had for the previous exercise, but again, just save this as the new exercise and then follow the posted instructions to export it and submit it.